It just it does happen.
So I think this brings us quite nicely onto contracts.
Yeah,
right?
that's a good segue.
Yeah. With the digital music market, it's massive. It's all about sharing. It's collaboration. It's going on all the time. You guys are just sharing non-stop every single night. There's music programs that work together, and like we were just saying about the physical market, it's all moved over where there's quite a lot of inside job stuff going on. So it's the right time to get the terms and conditions on the table, really, when you enter into a deal. I know that you've had a few major deals.
Well, yeah.
I'm going to swing this one over to you guys, if you don't mind, to give us a rundown on the contractual side, which is going to be really important when you set up your label, and if you're signing external artists, you want to be, where you both stand, either party. So yeah, if you've got any information you could share with the guys.
First and foremost, for me, I think don't ever go into it lightly. You really need to get a specialist lawyer.
Get a lawyer. Don't think you can understand it.
Yeah. Don't think, I can just read through that and I'll know what the ins and outs of it are.
It's purposely made
to confuse you.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, because it's all spiel talk, legal talk.
So what appears like it's saying one thing in one sentence, when you read further down the contract, they'll flip it and it'll mean so. Get a lawyer, like so definitely get a lawyer.
Because the amount of acts I know and bands I know who are still tied into contracts, Some Bizarre label.
Yeah.
Some Bizarre had the Mark Almond, Swans, Fetus, 80s label. The guy's a lunatic who runs it. He's ringing me every day. I think he's losing the plot. His bands have been signed in for 30 years. And they can't get out of it. They can't get out of this contract with him. Even though they hate the guy, they can't get out of it because they're signed, sealed and delivered into this contract. They've signed it all away. When they were like 18, 19-year-old kids. And they're like 40, 50-year-old blokes now are just fucking seething because they can't get out of these contracts.
There's certain clauses within a contract you really need to pay attention to. And for me, they are the term.
Term, definitely the most important.
Unless you really want to give away your music for life, never sign a in perpetuity contract. In perpetuity, which is forever and a day.
Your soul.
You're just giving away that copyright forever.
A lot of labels will ask for life of copyright. Try and get out of that if you can.
That's another way of saying.
That's another way of saying it.
In perpetuity. I think in this market nowadays, you want to be doing something between, I don't know, 5 years, something like that, 5 to 10.
Seems a little long.
It's hard because on both ends of this argument.
It depends on the size of the label.
Depends. From an artist, I'd say 5 years, but from a label, I'd say I ain't going to sign anything unless I can get it for 10 or 15 years. So.
If you get like an in perpetuity contract, so you're signed forever, is that like your artist name, which is you as a person?
Depends. That's the other thing. There's two types of contracts. There's an artist contract, and there's the piece of music. The recording. It's two different things. You've got to recognise there. Generally, a lot of labels will just sign it as the recording. That piece of music and its associated remixes or all other versions of.
Which has led to a really strange thing. A lot of major label artists now they've re-recorded. Def Leppard was quite a prime example where they re-recorded their whole catalogue themselves again, tweaked it here and there, just made it a little bit different. So now that's a completely different set of work that Mercury Records no longer owns, which is just melts my brain.
That's to get over the recording 50-year period. That's just putting something else over the top of it to actually then get that 50-year period back again.
I think it was also to get away from Mercury Records though. They were trying to leave Mercury Records, so they wanted all the income from that. So
the minute a term lapses on the contract, you're able to take that track back again, and
but then there are clauses in the contract that if you don't, when your term expires, if you don't actually notify them in writing that it's expired, it will just roll over, and then you're stuck into another term. So but again, this is really stuff a lawyer will talk to you, and a good lawyer will know all of this stuff and will protect you against most of this. I mean, another thing I suppose to look for is what kind of cost you're going to be, because basically a record label, when they sign you, they might say, You've heard it on the TV. So-and-so's been signed £1 million record deal. Simon Cowell's just signed someone for £1 million. That doesn't mean they've been given £1 million in cash. That just means that there's £1 million allocated maybe over 4 or 5 albums, split 200 grand an album, advance. So basically they'll get their advance money for the album, but then everything is recoupable. Yeah. Absolutely. So that's another thing to watch as well.
And if it is that kind of size, I'm telling you now, the amount of money they spend on marketing promotion, you know, far outweighs, you know, a lot of other, you know, they got to look at, they'll pull in the marketing promotion side of it, the amount of money they spend on marketing and promoting it. Producers, you know, getting producers in to actually do it, you know, that'll cost a ton. Distribution as well.
Remixes.
That all comes into it. Everything. Yeah. Before, you know, they even look at sharing it with the artist. And then their cut on top of it as well, which, you know, if you're looking at a major, it's going to be...
That's kind of making it sound all doom and gloom. There is still some money in the pot for you, though.
I think it's also worth looking at what cut you get back, isn't it, on the actual per CD sale as well.
The royalty rate on there.
The royalty rate, because it's all very well having a great contract, but then if they're taking 90% of your royalties, then you're being fucked over in that respect as well. So,
but well, we can talk about that in a minute anyway, major and indies. But another clause I think is really important that you should know about as well is you all know what exclusive and non-exclusive means. Yeah? No? Okay. If you sign, for instance, a track exclusive to a label, you're then not able to, you know, put that out with any other label in any other territory, or you can't do anything else with that track. But if it's non-exclusive, from a non-exclusive point of view, you're able to then license that off to other labels or other you know, synchronization media or anything like that.
I'd say another interesting point as well, and it is relevant to music, but I'm going to use a movie example for this, is what George Lucas did with the original Star Wars films. Back when they came out, when he signed a deal with Fox to release the films, he didn't want Fox to release it, but he didn't have the money to release it, so he needed their money to help get the film distributed. But what he kept back was all the merchandise rights. They all belonged to him, and that's made him an absolute fortune. And now I think that is even more relevant nowadays with music than it ever has been. Before it was just T-shirts, but now it's everything. You know what I mean? There's Justin Bieber lunchboxes.
Well, the majors are now doing 360-degree deals where it encompasses ticket sales, merch, the whole lot, everything you actually do. Will be involved in all that. So.
Which is, you know, and a lot of money now is made on performance. You know,
I'd say probably more money is going to be made from those avenues than the actual record sales themselves.
Just on the contract thing, I've given up using contracts personally for the Genepool stuff because the ones I did have in place with artists would have cost too much to follow up to get my money back anyway when they did a runner, and the other way around never seemed to happen. Do you know what I mean? So I don't actually use contracts. I mean, technically I'm still N-Dubs' manager, but I couldn't afford to fight that fucking thing either. Do you know what I mean? So I've got a proper West End lawyer contract. Do you know what I mean? But it's not worth the paper it's written on. So it depends whether you've got the money to fight these things. You've got to make sure the contract's right in the first place, and it's worth spending that money on legal advice to start with, rather than further down the line having to spend 10 times as much as that trying to fight the major label or the artist or whatever, and to kind of get your rights back.
I'd say, I mean, contracts are, like you said, they're an important part, but they're not the be all and end all. Don't let a contract ruin your chance of getting a record out. I mean, if a label is basically sticking to a point and they're just saying, if you don't do it, then see you later,
well,
then really weigh up whether it's
in my experience of that, you know, you can actually have some certain clauses changed. You know, a lot of labels are open to discussion and changes. Don't think
that's how the lawyers make their money.
If that's there in front of you, that's it. You know, you can negotiate with labels.
They expect it?
And they will expect it, You know, especially from an advance point of view,
no one's going to expect you to just sign the bit of paper they put. That's not going to happen.
You know, that's another area. Advances and release commitment. That's a funny one. I've had experience of that. Grant has probably. You know, every contract will have a release commitment on it. Say 6 months. We will release that piece of music within a 6-month period. If they don't release that piece of music within that 6-month period, you have the right to take that music back, even if they've paid you a huge advance, and they can't ask for that advance back because that's their fault.
I've had that happen a couple of times.
I've had it happen to me as well. I've made quite a bit of money just out of advances.
I'll tell you a couple of great ones. I had a record signed to Virgin. They paid me quite a bit of money to sign the record. Made a video, did everything, then didn't release the record. And then exactly what Si just said, the term expired for them to release it if it wasn't released in X amount of time. So it reverted back to our record label. Then we released it independently, did pretty well with it. And then Virgin came back to us and re-licensed it from us again, paid us an extra 20 or something grand to license the record again, and didn't release it again, so it came back to us again. So that was fantastic.
You're sitting there laughing, really, you know.
Fantastic. We got to release the record, got a load of money.
A Virgin of, just throwing money around willy-nilly.
So this is back in the olden days. This is like back in 2003. I produced UK Garage under the name Bump and Flex. And we did. I did a Bump and Flex.
What? Never said you're a Bump and Flex.
Did I? We did a track. We signed a track to London Records to Warner Brothers called Promises, and they paid. I don't even know I should be telling you this, but they paid us £100,000 for the single. How much? 100 grand. This is back when UK Garage was flinging. Yeah, everyone was jumping all over it. So 100 grand, we were like, this is fantastic, you know what I mean? We all went out and bought nice things. Didn't even release it. Record just reverted back to us. 6 months, boom. 100 grand. Someone in that record label signed a cheque for 100 grand, and no one lost the job. No one. So
that was the time when the record industry. I mean, there was money. There was
money flying around. Yeah.
I mean, they used to fly us out for a 2-day conference to Spain, like 150 of us. Do you know what I mean? It's just the money going around.
All the mid-end trips and all that.
Oh man, it's just crazy.
I used to work with some artists, and the remix fees you used to get. You could demand, 5-6 grand a remix fee, and there was artists out there probably demanded even more.
Well, that's another thing that I was going to talk about actually is I don't know if we'll get to this at some point, but. Even that, the remixer thing, I suppose it's not really the discussion for today, but remixers used to be paid differently than they are now. Back, even 10 years ago, you'd get a remix fee for doing a project, and then you'd get points as well, if you were good and your name was sellable. So, say like you might get 10 grand for doing the mix and 2 or 3 points on a single. So you were getting a percent. Points are basically a percentage of the sales revenue coming back as well on top. So the advance is basically what it sounds like. The fee is an advance. That has changed now though, and no one pays big fees for remixers anymore. That just doesn't happen. Basically now all a remixer is getting offered is a percentage of sales. So if you're talking about a remixer's given, even if they're given 50% of the track that they've done, so their download is up there on iTunes for, what is it on iTunes, 79p?
Yeah.
79p, so half of that after the label's taken their money, what's the label cut with iTunes?
It depends what sort of label do you've got really. What, a distribution label?
Yeah.
10% I suppose.
Right, okay. So let's say basically, for a remix of a track on iTunes, as the remixer, you're probably going to earn about 20 pence off it.
Yeah.
If you're lucky, 15, 20p. And there's no upfront payment, there's no upfront, remix fee. I mean, that's where I made a lot of money off remix, especially during the Bump and Flex time. That it got to the point where some of the acts, the last 4 or 5 remixes I did, I mean, it actually got to the point at one point where I was turning mixes down. There were so many coming in each week. We was turning down like 2 or 3 because there just wasn't enough time. And it was just flippant. I mean, given the chance again now, I'd have snapped them all up and taken their money. I'd have had all their arms off. But at the height of it, we were getting 20 grand a remix. £20,000 to sit in the studio for an afternoon and remix some crappy pop.
Signing similar contracts to just a normal record label agreement.
Similar, I mean, it's a remix agreement contract. So basically, it's a slimmed down version of which basically gives them the right to use your recording and do what they want with it.
I've seen from a few students a couple of different contracts, and I think be aware that quite a lot of record labels out there, little independents, are just cutting and pasting contracts and just winging them over.
Definitely.
And I've seen some with
a lot of the labels don't even know what some of that information in them mean.
No.
So you've got to be really, really careful.
Yeah. I think if someone's approaching you to sign your record, others are going to as well. So just seek some advice You know?
I think the fairest deal from an indie label point of view is the old rough trade 50-50 deal, where they'll pay for everything, manufacturing, distribution,
give you
promo, and then when it's recouped, you just split it 50-50. I think that's probably the fairest way, and it's a model we've kind of used now and again as well. So
that's a common contract now anyway, isn't it? It's a 50-50 just on sales, but also third-party licensing. You all know what third-party licensing is, yeah?
So licensing to compilations, stuff like that.
TV synchronization,
Xbox games,
games, websites, anything, apps. Nowadays, yeah. So that's third-party licensing, other than sales. So yeah, 50%, and that's what you see generally on most contracts now, unless it's a major, because a major will continually try to take a piss.
Well, I'll tell you what, there's a little lesson for you. The second record deal I signed, I actually signed away my rights to third-party licensing. It was in the contract that the label kept all the third-party licensing.
Yeah.
There you go.
And did they do a lot with it, third-party?
Well, it was... Oh, yeah.
Just let it go.
It took me a long time to get over it. All it's back.
So yeah, always, really look at a contract closely and look at the clause. Read it. You get used to them after you start to see them a lot. Anyway, you kind of you know exactly what to look for within one. You know.
But I think also keep in mind what Pete said. I think that's really important what you said earlier, man, about the contract. Really, it isn't really worth the paper it's written on. You know what I mean? If it comes to it, the chances are neither party is going to want to get mixed up in taking it legal, because to start taking it to someone to court over a contract costs a lot of money. The artists don't have it, the labels nowadays don't. The big labels will have it, that's different. But if you're talking about independent kind of people, they're not going to fight, you know what I mean? Most chances, most situations, people will just say, and you just go your separate ways. Unless, obviously, something you've done becomes a massive record, then it all switches up again. But definitely don't let that blow out. That's what I said earlier. Don't let it blow out your chance. You know what I mean? If someone's really sticking to a point, just get a good lawyer, but don't cut off your nose to spite your face, I suppose is what I
Depending on the size of
a good music lawyer as well. Don't just go down to your local
because they
no. You have to have a music lawyer,
and it's worth spending the money on a pucker one, because else you'll be
stitched.
And try and get a. Well, I want to. When you do spend it on when you do get a lawyer to look at a contract, try and get them to do you a bundle price. Don't let them charge you hourly, because that can get really expensive as well.
Well, it'll come into publishing in a bit as well, because you know, if you have a publishing deal, you know, part of the publisher's duty is their legal department will actually look over record label contracts for you as well. So sometimes you don't always need.
Yeah, that's a good point.
A music lawyer.
Good point. Yeah.
All right, but we'll come on to that in a bit with publishing.
And some further reading you could do straight off is get on the Musicians Union. They've got loads of one sheets and some really valid information on there. Or even if you've got a pal that's a member of the Musicians Union.
I think even if you're setting up a label and releasing mates records and all that sort of stuff, as long as you've got even just a page agreement of some description, it doesn't have to be all up to a full contract, whatever. I think just trusting your mates in it's business. Do you know what I mean? I think you've got to have something in writing where it just
definitely,
or a heads of agreement or something like that. So, because even my mates have stitched me up.